Title: The $3,200 Trap, A Hustler's Downfall on Judge Judy. The air in the television studio was cold, sterile, and thick with a tension you could almost taste, a stark contrast to the heated, messy reality that had brought a young couple, Mark and Sarah Dale, face to face with a man they now saw as a predator, a man named Jake Thompson, under the unforgiving gaze of the most formidable arbiter of small claims justice in America, Judge Judy. This wasn't just about a car. It was a story of trust shattered, of a new beginning for a young family poisoned by deception, and of a slick operator who believed his smooth talk could outmaneuver the sharpest mind in the courtroom. For Mark and Sarah Dale, this day was the culmination of months of frustration and financial strain, a desperate plea for someone to see the truth they had lived. For Jake Thompson, it was a stage for his carefully constructed defense, a house of cards about to be blown down by the hurricane of judicial scrutiny. And for everyone watching, it was about to become a masterclass in how a simple lie can unravel a life. A suspenseful drama where every word, every pause, and every flicker of emotion would be dissected under the bright lights of truth. Judge Judy didn't just enter the room, she commanded it. Her presence an immediate gravitational pull that centered all the chaos and anxiety onto the podium before her. She picked up the file, her eyes, sharp and missing nothing, scanning the documents that told a dry, bureaucratic version of a very human conflict. She looked first at Jake Thompson, who stood with a posture that tried to project calm assurance, but couldn't quite hide the nervous energy vibrating just beneath the surface. Her voice, when it cut through the silence, was not loud, but it was absolute, each word a precise, deliberate strike. "I've already determined," she began, her tone leaving no room for debate, "that you're a bit of a hustler." Jake's mouth opened to form a reflexive, "Not true," but the wave of her hand silenced him before the sound could fully escape. She laid out the foundation of his character with the cool efficiency of a prosecutor presenting an open and shut case. "You drove an unregistered car," she stated, listing the months like a prosecutor reading an indictment: October, November, December, January, and February. "According to you, according to this, July to February. And you didn't pay the sales tax that you knew you were required to pay within 30 days. So that's being a bit of a hustler." The label hung in the air. Hustler, a word that painted a picture of someone always working an angle, someone who saw rules as suggestions and other people as opportunities. Mark Dale, a man with the weary eyes of someone who worked with his hands and believed a man's word was his bond, clenched his jaw, feeling a surge of validation. Sarah, standing beside him, her body still remembering the recent trauma of a cesarean section and the exhausting, beautiful haze of new motherhood, felt a tear of relief threaten to escape. Finally, someone was seeing what they had seen. Judge Judy then moved to the heart of the transaction, the bait that had lured the Dales into Jake Thompson's web. "Now, when you advertise the car for how much?" she asked, already knowing the answer. $4,000, Jake replied, his voice steady, a salesman reciting a number. "And you sold them the car for," Judge Judy prompted, leading him toward the trap he had set for himself. $3,200, Jake said. And then, in a move of breathtaking audacity, he tried to shift the shadow of dishonesty onto his victims, which they asked me to falsify the title to put $2,000 on the title. So I left it blank and I just signed the title over to them. He even had the nerve to suggest a test, a challenge to the court. If I sold the truck to them for $3,200, can they show you the title and see how much is on the back of it? It was a classic misdirection, a magician's trick designed to draw the audience's eye away from the real sleight of hand. But Judge Judy was not an audience to be fooled. "I don't care what's on the back of it," she dismissed with a wave that could wilt steel, her focus unshakable. She zeroed in on the core of Jake's defense, the narrative he had been polishing and perfecting since the day the Dales realized they'd been swindled. "Your defense is that the $3,200 was a negotiated price, taking into consideration that there was a tax lien on the car." Jake, sensing an opening, pounced. "That was released the same day," he claimed, a statement that was immediately met with a firestorm of contradiction from the other side of the courtroom. "That's not true, Your Honor. I have text messages," Mark Dale insisted, his voice rising with the frustration of a man who had been told one too many lies. "And I do too. I have text messages also," Jake shot back, a chaotic duel of he said, she said, threatening to erupt. "I tried to meet them at the DMV," he added, painting himself as the responsible party. Judge Judy restored order with a single raised eyebrow. She reiterated the undeniable fact, the anchor point in this sea of conflicting stories. "You already told me that you did not pay the tax lien, the taxes on the car." "That is correct, Your Honor," Jake conceded. "But I reduced the price of the vehicle, so they can afford the taxes on it. The sales price on the vehicle was $4,000. I reduced it to $3,200 so they can afford the $500 in sales taxes that I owed for that." He presented this as an act of generosity, a benevolent discount from a seller helping out a young couple. In his mind, he was the good guy. "That's a good," he started, but Judge Judy cut him off, her voice a whip crack. "Are you trying to talk over me?" The sudden shift in her tone was terrifying, a reminder of who held the power in this room. "No, ma'am," Jake backtracked, the confidence in his voice faltering for the first time. "I understand exactly what your defense is," she said, her words slow and deliberate, each one a weight placed on the scale of justice. She then laid out a parable of everyday life, a scenario every parent could understand, to illustrate the fundamental difference between an honest negotiation and a deceptive one. "I have never gone to somebody's house when my kids were buying their first cars, and they advertised a car for $2,000 and paid them $2,000. You get to the place, and then you negotiate a price. So what I have to determine is whether the negotiated price that the two of you had was because you told them that there was a tax lien on the car." "Absolutely," Jake affirmed, clinging to his story. But Judge Judy was about to dissect the tiny, crucial fracture in his logic, the hairline crack that would bring the whole wall tumbling down. "Now that's very comfortable for you to say now. Well, I reduced the price by $800 of what I was asking for the car, and therefore let them pay the tax lien." She paused, letting the self-serving nature of that statement hang in the air. Then she delivered the critical distinction, the legal and moral chasm between two very different conversations. There's a difference in saying that and saying, "I told them that there was a tax lien on the car for $500, and therefore I would reduce the price. But they would have to pay not only their sales tax, but my sales tax." She leaned forward, her gaze pinning Jake to the spot. "Now, I want you to tell me which one it is." This was the moment of truth. This was where his carefully rehearsed story would either hold or collapse. "The tax lien, I reduced it, the total price of the car, for that reason," he stated, deliberately vague, trying to stay in the safe gray area he had created. But Judge Judy would not allow vagueness. She demanded precision. She demanded the truth. "Is that what you— pay attention to my mouth?" The entire studio seemed to hold its breath. "Is that why you told them you were reducing the price of the car because you had not paid the taxes on the car? Is my question." She was forcing him to admit to the specific act of disclosure. "Yes, ma'am, we had a verbal agreement," Jake claimed, invoking the most fragile and unprovable of contracts. But before he could build on that claim, Judge Judy immediately turned to the plaintiffs, to Mark and Sarah Dale, and asked the simple, devastating question, "Is that what Mr. Thompson told you?" The answer came back in a unified, forceful, emotionally charged denial. "No. No, ma'am." Mark Dale, his face a mask of raw honesty, elaborated, "I asked Mr. Thompson over and over again, will there be any problems getting this car registered? We do not to go through nothing else." He had been explicit. He had been clear. He had done everything a cautious buyer should do. Sarah, her voice trembling with the memory of the stress that had overshadowed what should have been a joyful time with her new baby, added her testimony. "He did not say that to us." The clash was absolute. It was his word against theirs, but his word was the word of a man who had already been established as a hustler, Judge Judy, with the patience of a surgeon, returned to her precise line of questioning, cutting through the emotional noise to isolate the single material fact. All I want to know is whether he told you that he had not paid the sales tax. No, Sarah interjected, her voice firm now. That would never have. She was about to explain that such knowledge would have sent them running, that they were not in a position to take on someone else's financial burdens, especially with a new infant at home. But Judge Judy, focused like a laser, was not yet ready for the context. She was still building the factual foundation. She turned back to Jake, challenging his assertion that the Dales should have somehow known about the car's unregistered status. Now you knew, however, that he hadn't registered the car. No, we didn't, Mark insisted. Jake, seeing another opportunity to confuse the issue, jumped in. How come they didn't know that when my name is not on the front of the title? That's not true. He was trying to imply that the Dales were somehow willfully ignorant, that the evidence of his delinquency was right there on the document for them to see if they were smart enough. It was another attempt to blame the victims. It was at this moment that Sarah Dale, pushed to her emotional limit, brought the full weight of their personal circumstances into the courtroom. The frustration, the fear, the exhaustion of new parenthood mixed with the anger of being deceived all came pouring out. At the time, I had just got out the hospital, had my cesarean. Her voice broke slightly, the memory of physical pain and vulnerability now intertwined with this financial betrayal. So I wanted to avoid any complications whatsoever with the vehicle, and we made that very clear to him. I had an infant. She was pleading not just with the judge, but with the world, to understand why this deception cut so deep. They had been at their most vulnerable, and Jake Thompson had taken advantage. Judge Judy, often perceived as unsympathetic, showed a flicker of understanding before steering the testimony back to the legal core. No, listen to me. I don't care. It's not that I don't care that you had surgery. That's not part of this case. Her words might have sounded harsh, but they were legally precise. The cesarean section, while explaining their state of mind and their desperate desire for a simple, clean transaction, was not the cause of their financial loss. The cause was the alleged lie. She brought the inquiry back to its pivotal point, the final, crucial question for the plaintiffs. All I want to know is, did he tell you that there was a tax lien on the car? And with perfect, damning clarity, Sarah Dale delivered the line that would likely decide the entire case, a simple, powerful, and absolute denial. Not at all. In those two words, the suspense broke. The haze of Jake Thompson's excuses and misdirections cleared, revealing the simple, ugly truth at the center of the case. He had not been a generous negotiator. He had been a hustler who had sold them a problem disguised as a solution. And now, under the bright, unforgiving lights of Judge Judy's courtroom, his hustle was finally over. Lesson for the listeners and viewers. The story of Mark and Sarah Dale versus Jake Thompson is a stark and powerful reminder that when a deal seems too good to be true, it almost always is. This case teaches us that verbal agreements are fragile shields against deception, and that the charming, plausible seller across from you may be weaving a story designed to separate you from your money while passing on their burdens. Always get every promise, every disclosure, and every term of a major purchase in writing. Do your own independent research on the item, especially a vehicle, checking its registration status and lien history directly with the relevant authorities before a single dollar changes hands. Do not let pressure, emotion, or a seemingly sympathetic story override your common sense. Let the downfall of the hustler, Jake Thompson, be a lesson to all. Honesty is not just a moral imperative. It is a practical necessity, and in the end, the truth has a way of finding its way into the light, especially when it finds itself standing before Judge Judy.